I'm Patricia Nelson. I'm an entertainment lawyer and intellectual property lawyer. I live in the Manchester area, and I have done a panel at the ITVFest, which I think is really an amazing thing that came to Manchester for the first time.
In what ways was it amazing to you, Patricia?
It was amazing because it brought together a whole group of content creators and people in the television industry that have probably never visited this area before in their lives. So it's really kind of a wonderful experience for them to see the town, for the town to see them, and to hopefully encourage people to think of Vermont as a great place to start producing and creating potentially films, television series.
What are your thoughts on how this might affect locals?
Well, I think that one of the things that came out of this was there was a movement to create something called the Vermont Production Council, which is a group of people who decided to get together to let the industry know that there are resources available in the area. Not only do we have the beautiful locations, but there are professionals in the area, whether it's designers, actors, screenwriters, production companies that can really be available to outside production companies that want to come in and use the resources that are available in Vermont to make films. And one of the things Vermont doesn't have that a lot of states do have are tax credits and film bureaus and things like that try to work to encourage people to come in to actively go out and solicit business for the state from the film industry. That's something Vermont doesn't really have on the same scale as some other.
So let's say I got all jazzed up. I'm a local and now I want to create my own TV show. I'm assuming you would advise against just going whole hog without looking into a few things on the legal side of things?
Absolutely.
So what should I do to protect myself, even though
Well, one of the things that we just actually did a panel on this very, very topic. I mean, one of the first things that you want to do is if you're starting a project is you want to make sure that you know what the legal issues are. So if you're initially creating something, if you've written a script or something, you want to register the copyright. If you've started to film, you want to make sure you have releases from people that are going to be in the project. You want to make sure that you have in writing all the rights and you've acquired all the rights that you may need.
Can you give us some example of those rights?
Well, so for instance,
rights.
Music rights. If you want to use music, that's a huge issue. Right. We generally always advise people if they're doing a video production or a project and creating a work, the best thing that you can possibly do is go hire some musicians, create new original music, and get an assignment of all rights of copyright to that music. That is the easiest and probably most inexpensive way of doing a project like that.
Because that means I own it as opposed to rent it.
Exactly. So you own it, you can do whatever you want with it, you can license it when say Hollywood comes along and wants to take up your amazing project and show it, throughout the world. You don't have to go back and try and renegotiate rights. There's nothing that is going to hinder your ability to use that music going.
All right, let me ask you about faces. So we can assume actors, you get the release.
Well, you're usually going to have some sort of an agreement when you're hiring actors. You have to have an agreement in place with them, and you have to make a decision as to whether this is going to be a union project or a non-union project. If it's a union project, you're going to need actors that are members of the Screen Actors Guild or AFTRA, which is the American Federation of Radio and Television Artists. So those are things that you need to consider when you're doing these types of projects.
And in terms of other faces, if I wanted to show the Manchester Street Fest in it,
That you don't really need releases for. That takes place in public. You don't really need to have releases for things that are in a public space. If you're going to be interviewing people and talking to them, that you might want to have releases if you want to use them going forward. But
is the word expectation of privacy, right? Is that...
Yes, expectation of privacy is a legal concept. So people walking in the streets generally have no expectation of privacy. So therefore, they can generally be used without a release. If you go into their home and shoot them surreptitiously, they have an expectation of privacy. You're shooting through somebody's window or something like that.
Right.
You would not be able to use that without getting a written release.
And does anything change in terms of children? For instance, you're at the Manchester Street Fest, you've done a pan of the crowd, and your camera settles on a child dancing and having a wonderful time.
Generally, that should be okay, but it's probably always a good idea to sort of get permission from the parent. I mean, obviously, child is, if you need a release from a child, you're going to have to get a sign up from the parent for anybody under 18.
Okay. And the houses on Main Street, do they have an expectation of privacy?
No, not if you're filming the outside.
Okay, so houses as long as you're not standing on their lawn? Or it's better.
Well, if you're standing on their lawn, you're entering into a private space, so there may be trespass issues.
Got it. So a lot of this sounds like just be polite and ask. First, seek out a lawyer.
Right.
And if you were my lawyer and I was going, okay, I'm going to be shooting this little pilot in Manchester, Vermont. Would there be like 4 or 5 things you'd say I need to immediately know about this project? Obviously, are you going to try to use music? Who are your actors?
Right. You want to know, first of all, what's being created. Is this a scripted project? Are you working from a script? Are you working from, is this an unscripted project? Do you have people who have contributed in any way? If you do, you want to make sure that you have agreements in place with them for whatever content they're contributing. If somebody's writing a script for you, you want to make sure you have an agreement in place with that person. If you're doing interviews, you want to make sure you have releases for the people that you're interviewing. If you're hiring crew to help you, you want to make sure that you have agreements in place with them. So, those are all the things that you need to plan out before you actually start. And the reason to plan it out first, and this is something that happens quite frequently, is somebody comes along and they say, I've got a great idea for a project, and my roommate is going to help me, and we're gonna write this together, and this is great. Everybody's fine. Yeah. We don't have any written agreements, but it's cool. We're good friends. Then all of a sudden something happens where there's a falling out. That person has rights to that material that they've created. So if you then all of a sudden get picked up by somebody who wants to distribute this, and your roommate all of a sudden says, you know what, I don't really want to do that, and you don't have no written agreement in place with that person, then you have no right to negotiate for the sale of that property, because that person will have rights to it. So it's really a good idea to make sure these types of things are thought about and dealt with before you. You certainly educate yourself. There's tremendous resources online that you can go and look up about what to do first. A lawyer is a good idea for drafting the agreements and the documents that you need. We never advise people to just pull things off of sort of standard agreements off the internet, because you want to make sure that they're tailored to your project. And sometimes it's worth spending the money for a lawyer they don't have to be complicated, they don't have to be elaborate, they can be fairly simple and straightforward, and a lot of lawyers, but they have to be there. We just did a panel here discussing some of these issues about distribution, and somebody actually brought up this very subject. He was describing a situation where he's doing a graphic novel, and he had somebody sketch initial drawings for him, and he never had an agreement in place with this person, and the person disappeared. And now he doesn't know what to do, because he doesn't know whether he actually has to go and have everything redrawn. He has no copyright assignment or anything to those drawings, so he's a little afraid about what his situation is. And that's something that can really trip up a project more than anything.
I got you. Be prepared.
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.